Hi, everyone. I missed you so much last week since you didn't have a response that I thought I would come tonight, this Sunday evening, and tell you how much I'm looking forward to your responses on the Scarlet Letter, due on Friday at high noon of week 5. It's hard to believe that we're actually entering week 5, and at the end of this week, we'll be 1/3 of the way through the semester. It's pretty amazing. And so I hope that you're beginning to think about the responses in this part of the semester that you'll want to return to in your final portfolio to really come back to revise, expand, and develop. So do keep that in mind, right? Keep the goal of the final portfolio in mind as you start to go back over your materials and think through which ones are really going to be of interest to you to develop further. So our goals for this week, at least, are pretty straightforward. It's the week that we're going to finish reading the Scarlet Letter. I'm hoping that you will be caught up on listening to all of the lectures associated with the Scarlet Letter. And of course, you'll be posting your fourth blog about the novel, fourth blog and a blog about the novel by Friday. So I thought I'd send you this brief message just as a way of reconnecting with you and of perhaps returning all of our minds to the work at hand. And I also wanted to just say a few things about the reading responses, or how I'm hoping that maybe some of these reading responses will be structured as you approach blog number 4. I've been very happy, incidentally, with the reading responses you've given me so far, and I suppose because I've been so happy, I want to demand more and more from you. I like to see a trajectory in which the responses start out as pretty good and then end up really high on the scale of excellent. So here are some things that you might undertake in this upcoming blog post. And most of these are spelled out in some detail in the overview of assignments, but also particularly in the paths through the Scarlet Letter. I'll just go over a few of them here. You might begin with a consideration of Nathaniel Hawthorne's notebook entries that are specifically related to the Scarlet Letter. When we look at Hawthorne's notebooks, we can go back as much as 5 years, right, and find notes that are quite relevant to the work he would do in the Scarlet Letter. I gave you 2 of them. One of them is very clearly a description of Hester Prynne, and the other one is a little stranger. In fact, it's very strange, but I think it's probably a quote pertaining to Arthur Dimmesdale. So here's the first note, written sometime in 1845. The novel is, of course, written and published in 1850. The life of a woman who, by the old colony law, was condemned always to wear the letter A sewn on her garment in token of her having committed adultery. Clear reference. Now listen to this second one, also in 1845. To make literal pictures of figurative expressions, a man suddenly turned into a shower of briny drops, an explosion of laughter, a man blowing up, and his fragments flying about on all sides. He cast his eyes upon the ground, staring up at him in wonderment, etc., etc., etc. Quite the passage. If you'd like to, speculate about the meaning of that one and how that passage gets elaborated in fascinating ways in the Scarlet Letter. Second, you might undertake an exploration of the relationship between fiction and history by thinking more about the relationship between Hawthorne and Surveyor Pugh, as that relationship is elaborated in the Custom House, and or the relationship between Hester Prynne and Anne Hutchinson, an antinomian, a Puritan antinomian figure who I talk a little bit about in the notes. What's the meaning of the past to Nathaniel Hawthorne? Right? We've talked about this a little bit when we talked about the Custom House, but certainly that question returns in the Scarlet Letter when Hester herself, right, thinks about what her personal past means in a new world and in a new condition. What's valuable about the past and what's dangerous about it? And you might consider a further question, and that's how strong is our relationship to the past? And on the one hand, Hawthorne seems to be saying it's very, very strong. Right? We can never get away from it. And on the other hand, he seems to suggest that in an instant, right, one decision can sever us uh, really almost totally from our past self. So what is going on here in this dialectic? Third, you might want to continue your explorations of Hawthorne's critique of gender relations in the 19th century by thinking about the Scarlet Letter, and particularly the figure of Hester Prynne, in relationship to the earlier figures of Georgiana in the Birthmark, written in 1843, and Beatrice in Rappaccini's Daughter, which was written in 1844. And all of this, right, if you think about a trajectory here, Hawthorne gets married to Sophia Peabody in 1842. So 1842, we have Hawthorne's marriage. 1843, we have the Birthmark. 1844, we have Rappaccini's Daughter. And in 1850, the Scarlet Letter. Those three works are fundamentally concerned with questions of gender, and particularly what is the female gender? Right? What is it supposed to be? What can it be? What's fascinating about it? What's dangerous about it? Okay, that would be another possible route. You might also want to approach the really quite beautiful problem of interpretation in the novel. And the novel presents the problem of interpretation through its multiple and multiplying, right, interpretations of the meaning of the letter A. Right? Every time we think we know what A stands for, it certainly begins with a very obvious and literal meaning of adultery. But every time we think we know what it stands for, it turns into something else. Right? That A turns out to be a very, very unstable letter after all. You might also approach the problem of interpretation from another angle, right? Not necessarily by looking at the different meanings of the A and the potential of the A to mean almost anything, but you might also think about it from the angle of the work of reading, as Hawthorne understands it. Is reading a wholly analytical activity? Is it a wholly emotional activity? Is it some combination of intellect and emotion? And what is the role of sympathy, particularly in the 19th century sense of that word, right, as a kind of mechanism through which the feelings of others are transferred to us? Right? Is that kind of going on in the act of reading and the act of interpretation? Fifth, you might want to reflect on the experience of being a marked person. Right? Behind Hester's mark, right, lies the mark of Cain. Right? It's almost impossible to think of a mark on a person and not also relate it to the mark of Cain. What does it mean to be marked in society? How does the individual who is marked experience the mark? Quite literally, right, if we're looking at Hester, literally and figuratively though, how does the scarlet letter that she wears, and that arguably at some point in the history of her wearing it becomes almost like a tattoo, right, like part of her body, what effect does it have on her, or what multiple effects does it have on her? And what can we understand about the feeling of being marked, right, when through this experience through Hester's experience of being marked? I might also point out, and this is something that I hope you think about again when we turn to the work of Frederick Douglass, right? The idea of the mark in Hawthorne, right, is it's very symbolic in many ways, right, very figurative. But Douglas will return to the idea of the mark in a very physical way, right, the marks of slavery, the way slavery marks itself on the body. So this question of the mark and how we read the mark and how we experience the mark, right, as the marked person, right, will return to us in other questions that we pose in other works. You might, in another line of inquiry, you might want to think about the idea of utopia, especially if maybe you're a student of political science, right, or a student of history. Right? And if you've studied utopian societies, right, you might want to think about how the society in which Hester lives has an idea of itself, right, at least at its beginnings, as a utopia. And right, what happens to communities founded on the idea that they will become or that they will be, right, embody utopias? How does a utopia work? Right? And is it a utopia or a dystopia that Hester Prynne lives in? Why is it that utopias turn into dystopias so very easily? And what kinds of laws should operate in a utopia? Is there even a place for law? And if there is it a human law? Right? Is it a natural law? Is it divine law? And so combine a couple of things, right, when you're thinking about utopia, and particularly bring into that consideration, right, a consideration of the various kinds of laws that are evoked in the Scarlet Letter. You might also want to pursue a meditation on the effects of secrecy, right? Because this is a novel in which many people have many different secrets. Hester herself keeps a secret, right? She keeps the secret of the father of Pearl. Chillingsworth has a secret, right? He keeps it a secret that Hester was his wife or is his wife. And of course, Dimmesdale has a secret, arguably the biggest secret of all, that he is the father of Pearl. What does this do to somebody when they keep a secret? What are the effects of concealment on a person? And you could begin to explore those effects, right, through a close reading of any of those three major characters. Or you could even think about what the effect of that secret is on the one character who has no secret, and that is Pearl. You might also want to consider what Hawthorne means by the real. Right? At a certain point, right, in the Scarlet Letter, when he doesn't let Hester leave New England and go back to Old England, where she wouldn't be known, where she could start a life again, new life, he doesn't let her go back because he says that it wouldn't be real, that the most real things for her are right where she is, right, in New England. And although that reality is painful, perhaps enormously painful, that it is better, Hawthorne seems to suggest, to bear a painful reality than to experience a pleasurable unreality. Do you think that's true? Obviously, before you tell me whether you think it's true, right, you need to think about why Hawthorne says it, what it means to him, why does he believe that? Right? What's the evidence for that belief? And then perhaps reflect on how you understand what the real is and the value of the real. And of course, right, if none of these things, none of these lines of inquiry appeal to you, you could always talk about the structure of the novel, right? This very beautiful, very tightly structured novel, this novel that's structured really around those three scaffold scenes, right? It's an intensely specular novel. So you could look at it structurally, right, analyzing each of those scenes. Or you can always turn to the analysis of a particular character and see where it leads you. I certainly look forward to any one of these approaches, or any approach that you have thought of yourselves and wish to share with me. Whatever direction you choose to go in, though, keep in mind that the best responses do several things at once. First, they show your personal engagement with the materials. And that engagement, while it can be registered in many different ways, often is registered in the voice, right, the uniqueness of the voice of your own writing. Second, the responses should show off your critical thinking skills through your thoughtful formulation of either a question that you're pursuing or a frame for reading. Third, you want to demonstrate your close reading skills by attending to the imagery, the language, the nitty-gritty bits of passages, right, specific passages that underscore the argument or the point that you're making. And fourth, of course, since this is a writing-intensive class, and writing itself, right, it matters, not just the thoughts, but how those thoughts are expressed. Your proficiency in grammar, your proficiency as a stylist, all of your proficiency as a strong writer, all of your proficiencies. So I look forward to your thoughts, and I'm standing by to help you. And until we meet again, take very good care.